Hi, Till.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hello, hello.
Let's wait 3 minutes more and then we can start discussing. One second, we will see if Joe can join us. So let's wait 2 minutes or 3. Okay, I think we can start. Worst case, Joe will join on the way. So I put 3 topics into our discussion, agenda items, and the first one is KubeCon talk. I just wanted to say that with Joe we submitted talk for Paris, France, to inform community about the current status and expectations from the image compatibility working group, and also hear some community concerns and use cases and maybe more. So we just want to talk there generally about image compatibility working group, what's going on, and to hear some feedback maybe. Yeah, that's just kind of wanted to inform you that there will be talk about that from our side on KubeCon, if it's gonna be accepted, of course. So yeah. And then we have another topic, which is framework proposals, progress deadlines, and so on. I'm not sure if you read the last emails from Vanessa, but on the last America uh, meeting, we agreed that we are not going to focus on all use cases. Rather, we will try to deliver some framework or kind of language that people can describe all their use cases when it comes to compatibility, because we realize it's impossible that we gather everything in some standard way. So it would be a better idea that we can uh, bring some kind of framework that people can use to describe their requirements. So right now there is this idea to use annotations uh, that is, I think, originally coming from Christian. However, I have some concerns about using annotations. I just sent an email about that we will have to flatten all data into map string, which can be a little bit hard to put more complex use cases. Also, we each time we have to update the annotation, we have to rebuild the image in more like industrial use cases. It can be hard. So for example, you have to go through the whole certification path, validation path of the image, and so on. Each time you just update metadata. So for example, you have a new hardware that is being released that the image supports. You have to release new images just because of that. And I think that's not ideal. And on the other hand, you can end up with multiple images that don't change anything significant, but just metadata again. And that's my concern about that.
Adding another use case into the round is signing and encrypted images for confidential containers. So if you change the annotation, you would need to re-sign and recrypt your complete container, which changes the attestation pipeline, which changes everything, which is not favorable.
So you're saying it's not a good idea to have it detached, or what's your recommendation?
From my point of view, what we should uh, do is basically maybe a little bit expand the platform object, like CPU object. Sorry, Till, we cannot hear you. So I thought that we can update basically the platform object to add some information that are very important for image selection, maybe microarchitecture and so on, and everything else should be in the artifact. That's my personal opinion on that. And once we build some kind of framework or language that can describe each use cases, we put this in the artifact, and people can write their own tools, or we can build some generic tools that tries to validate everything. However, it might be, we would have to be careful with the architecture of the tool, how it should look like, and so on, because um, we have so many different use cases. So to validate all of these use cases, it might be impossible to have just one tool, or we would have a great contribution from everybody into that tool. So that's my perspective on that. We still cannot hear you, Till, unfortunately. So basically, I thought because there was a good idea from Vanessa that we can start writing some proposals from this framework for this framework. So I thought maybe we can have 2, 3, or 1 week to bring our own ideas how it should look like, create a pull requests to compatibility group repository, and then we can present the ideas on the meeting. That's the perspective.
Test 1 2 1 2.
That works now.
Ah, wonderful. Yeah, I'm a bit curious what other options we would have to add to the image, because I can come up with a couple of ideas, but I think people like the signature and people that need to encrypt stuff around need to come up with ideas what doesn't influence their pipelines. Because I'm very open on this one, where it's like, hey, I'm happy with annotations. Hey, I'm happy with things. As long as it's somewhere described, I'm happy. So I think this needs to go to the people that have stringent requirements.
Yeah. So I think to avoid that kind of that we don't influence pipelines and so on. I mean, to some extent, of course, the only way is to come up with artifact. But we would have to, as I said, split two things. The most important is just to, if we want to influence somehow image selection, we need to extend the image spec. I would like to do it in the minimum way that we don't have to, bring a lot of complexity in there. And other part is to bring the framework and people can put there anything they like. However, it will be a challenge later to build some kind of validation tool and so on. However, once we have a framework and the way how we describe this requirements that everybody can describe, it should be much easier. I thought about this validation tool, for example, like we have CNI plugins from Kubernetes, like you have separate plugins for, I don't know, Mac VTab and so on. We could come up with something similar. So if we have some core tool and we have some core scanners, let's call it like that, to validate if we have a appropriate configuration and so on set, and somebody comes with some, let's say, unusual or his specific use case, he can bring his own plugin or scanners and compile tool with that, or it depends how we design that tool, that he can execute his own scanning procedures and validation, that we can include that. That would be the ideal part for me. But yeah, it's just.
Well, as long as you've got schemas, you can take the data and be like, hey, we can reason about an image. And I think that's a good point where you can say like, hey, here's an artifact. Here's a pointer to a thing where you can grab it and reason about that image that I'm giving you.
Yes.
However, I think even if we do an artifact, as soon as we have a reference, the way the images are designed, they're static. So because it's hash based,
yeah,
I think we still also go into the signature problem. Or is there a way to exclude certain parts from that the encryption part? It's like I'm not familiar with the tools.
So if you're delivering your description via an OCI artifact, it's completely independent of the image. So the image can still be encrypted per layer or the complete image. And then this OCI artifact that you're shipping along the container, like the signature, it's also an OCI artifact. It's a completely independent thing. You can still sign the OCI artifact as well. So what's inside of the OCI artifact is independent of what the image is. So you can ship additional information like an OCI artifact, the tool, the policy that you want to apply against it, and then you can use the encrypted image with this artifact or without this artifact, if I understand Marcin correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is also my mental model.
Yeah. So we would have an artifact with subject field to a specific image.
Yeah.
Manifest, and there was also some concern. I don't remember the name of this person about the Windows use case, that it would be hard to, I think, keep everything up to date, if I understood correctly from the email. But that's just another maintenance issue, right? That if you release something, you have to keep your artifact up to date with all stuff. That's how I see that.
You need to update either your annotations or artifact or whatever else, how you're delivering it. You need to have your CI/CD pipeline. I mean, this is not new. This is not our things to solve how to build a correct CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah. One thing I see though is that the descriptor has the annotations. So if you encrypt the image, the descriptor is not encrypted. Do I get that correctly?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Because I was under the impression that the annotations were in the descriptor, not the image itself or the layer itself.
Yeah, but you want to protect your metadata as well. So for the confidential use case, I don't want that metadata changes. So I want to have some signing, and I think signing will include all the metadata.
Okay, but that's a different argument than, hey, we should not use annotations because they are encrypted compared to the artifact.
No, that's correct. The use case was signing and encryption.
Yeah. Okay. No, because that's what confused me for a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So either if it's annotations or an artifact, that's independent of the user signing. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, this is what I'm going to propose today on America's meeting. That maybe we should go a little bit more into artifact use case and extend this platform object with CPU additional info if it's required. And also I want to propose that we have 2 weeks, 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks, depends how people feel about that, to create their own proposal, how we should deal with that. I already started some stuff, and we will see how we are going to, how we will end up with all of this stuff. For example, as Brandon sent on the Americas meeting, like working group reference, people created a lot of proposals there, and the end result was combination of all of them, if I understood correctly. So I think that's a proper way that we move forward with that. So I would go with this, basically. Okay.
Yeah, I can see when we go for, we probably need kind of both, because we at least need to, well, we can take something else than annotations to define where the artifact is located for the more complex data models. But this as well, where you have the annotations, you can go for known artifacts, and you can have the ones that are very somebody third party that doesn't need to bother with the standard stuff, that can make their own, because that's the like power of the artifact, where you can be like, hey, we have a couple standard artifacts for a couple standard use cases, and everything on top of that, you're on your own, but here you can just add your data into it for your own tool. We cannot coordinate over this big span of how many months in the future this tool will come up. So that's kind of like the capability we're looking at.
I'm seeing that this way, like whatever you like to do with annotations is your own business. We are trying to come up here with some kind of standard way to build some new artifact type with specific use cases, which is this framework. And whatever you do outside of that, it's just your own business, and we cannot support that. Like if you put some compatibility stuff into annotations and you build your own tool, the burden of maintaining that and so on, it's up to you, right? So
yeah. Okay.
So if different entities start to create their own tools to get the things expressed that they want to actually see happening on the host when they have an image, how are we going to build compatible items at that point? Does it mean that everybody open sources their tools or provides a binary, or?
Yeah, that was my concern as well. Yeah, it's a very valid question, because from the Americas meeting we had this discussion that maybe we should allow everybody to build their own tools and then put their own use cases and so on. But I stand with that we should create one tool that is supported by OCI, like we have Validate, but the tool should allow to execute third-party plugins or third-party scanners and so on. So we have to be smart about the design of the tool itself. Because if for example, me as a standard user come like some kind of rookie, I want to create some kind of compatibility stuff, and I see so many tools, I will not know which one I should choose or which one will support what and so on, and then we can end up also with cross functionality and so on. That would be a little bit messy. So we should come up with one tool that allows maybe to execute third-party plugins, scanners, or whatever. That's my view on that.
Mm.
So you can have in your repo your own scanners that fulfill your own use cases, and you can put your own data into the framework, the standard schema, and the validation tool can somehow import your scanners from your own repo and execute them against the schema. That's how I see this.
So maybe
Okay.
maybe an
Yep.
maybe an
Go ahead.
example from the confidential. Maybe an example from the confidential compute. So if you have devices, software, you need to attest them. So you have gold measurements that you expect, and you have the runtime measurements that you are seeing currently, and you're comparing them with them. And how such a result looks like is independent, or it's vendor dependent, but how the policy and how the tooling is done is identical for everyone. So in a confidential compute environment, we are using OPA, the Open Policy Agent. So we can think about something using like that as well. The policies are written in one language, so everybody can see what is expected and what needs to be compared against it. And then we need this little engine that interprets the OCI artifacts, which are our gold measurements, against the runtime values, which will become from the container. So we need to use a common policy engine that everybody understands and agrees upon. And then this little tooling, as Marcin Oller said, should be vendor agnostic, so that we can use any OCR artifacts against any image. But how we are interpreting those results is dependent on the policy the user puts up on. And this policy can be seen by everyone. It's written in one language like OPA.
Yeah, I was making some notes, but yeah, I agree with that. So that should be a direction for this. And let's see what other group thinks of that as well. Joe, you try to say something? We cannot hear you. Okay, any more comments into this topic, framework, proposal, progress, deadlines, and so on? Okay, then we can move to the other topic, which is UFE and BIOS validation. And we had last time this discussion, right? If with this false positive checks. And I thought a little bit more about that as well. And maybe Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had some similar thoughts. that if some node administrator is enabling certain options, he has to make sure that BIOS configuration is also appropriate. So for example, if I'm loading KVM modules as sysadmin, I make sure that virtualization in BIOS is enabled and so on. But if we want to validate that use case, some BIOS settings and so on, and how we are going to do that, I think since we are working on this framework, if you really want to do this, you would have to come up with your own solution how to do that. But generally speaking, I would go with this assumption that if KVM is enabled on the Linux host, then I assume that in BIOS virtualization is enabled. That's my point of view on that. Even if it can lead to some false positive checks sometimes, but this is responsibility of the person who configures the node.
Yes, that was my sort of thinking as well. Okay, Joe.
Is it possible to run the KVM module normally if the BIOS had not been set to enable virtualization?
Maybe I didn't validate that, but some certain modules can be loaded, or some certain kernel configuration can be loaded without appropriate BIOS settings. We have to accept this case. The KVM was just an example, that like abstract example, let's call it like that. I didn't validate if you are able to load KVM module without setting virtualization, but I think you can. I remember right now that I did that in the past, and you can.
Okay. I remember that we just want to make sure the minimal compatibility, but not to guarantee that all compatibility should be validated. Because if you want to validate a feature cascaded by some other features, then it will become very, very complex. Maybe the engineer should guarantee that if KVM module has been loaded, then the BIOS should be enabled. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think when the engineer who sets up the host and claims that KVM or VFIO or whatever is enabled actually has the responsibility of noticing that this is also true. So I mean, I don't know, I would push it like almost like outside this specification. So that, I mean, yes, you have like power connected to the host. You have booted it. I mean, because a BIOS, that's really a nasty swamp to get into, which would mean that every vendor would need to have their BIOS scanner tool to interpret that actually their BIOS is now set up somehow correctly, and we would get an ever-expanding specification thereof, which actually makes absolutely no sense, because we are staring at basically kernel level things, because there's a lot of things in BIOS that is then, the kernel is there to handle all the hardware issues. So I think we should consult the kernel and or have some kind of validation that yes, KVM actually is turned on and it actually does work, and it's not that it just happened to manage to load 2 of 5 modules for virtualization and everything falls down. So I think, I mean, the kernel's basic point of it is that we abstract all the different various mysterious hardwares. So if you go and dig into the BIOS specifically, then we have like a ton of more specifications to start writing and thinking about. So
I think it makes sense if the property says virtualization support is available, that when it's configured or provided, that this is there, right? So that we don't need to independently verify that it's actually there. But if the property is only saying KVM module is loaded, then we can't deduct from that virtualization support is enabled, right? So I think the semantics of the property or the attribute is important what we should be defining.
Yeah, exactly. But if somebody likes to do this, you would like to be very, into details and check everything how it's enabled. If we provide this framework, people are free to do so. I mean, if somebody really wants to do that, I think over the framework they will be allowed and the tool. So we leave open space there. That's one of thing why we came up with this framework.
Yeah, I think that's actually reasonable, because then if you really have some integrity thing, you need to be able to do automatically when the thing boots up that it's actually now today it works, yesterday it didn't. But then the option is always that, okay, somebody types in the manually the value that this is now supported because I tested this and it has been working ever since. So that's completely fine. If somebody wants to really go dig deep down in BIOS, that's their choice then.
Yes, cool. Okay, so I think we don't have more agenda items unless somebody has some topic.
So actually, yeah, the BIOS thing, KVM thing, it means actually that after we have, okay, somebody makes a program or whatnot or tests it manually. And with that, actually, we come up to a conclusion that yes, KVM is available on the host. I mean, meaning it's there and it's supported and it runs and works. So that means that the specification actually that we are mostly concerned about takes it from there, that you have some means to gather data and then actually make an abstract statement that this is supported, and from there we actually have to match that with what the image, or actually the host and the image, they need to basically have the same things then. So that means that we always need to gather up kind of bunch of attributes, and from the attributes, both on the host side and the image side, we have some kind of standardized way of figuring out that what they are.
I would say, yeah, that's the bottom line, and the guide. I would call it as a guideline for users who write plugins how to do this, or scanners, whatever you call it. But also, we are enabling people or allowing people to go deep if they really want. So exactly what you said, Patrick, that the bottom line is that we should follow some kind of the assumption that if you enable KVM modules, you assume that in the BIOS configuration of virtualization is enabled. But if you really want to check yourself, you will still have a possibility over the framework. So framework gives you a lot of possibilities to do that. However, it's not required that you check that or so. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else, any topic?
So the only thought I have is, so I think we did discuss that we store the data as an additional OCI artifact, right? Which I think is generally the right approach. The question that I had in my mind and I wasn't able to find an answer for is, are there any attributes or descriptions or descriptors that we would like to have signed? So basically, that somehow need to be tamper-proof, because the detached OCI artifact means that it won't be in the signed part. And I wonder if we have anything where this would be a problem. I can't come up with something, but maybe someone else can.
I personally cannot as well.
You can sign the OCI artifact as well, and then the signature can be added to the, oh, let me just think. Yeah, it would be a chicken and egg problem.
Because if you release a new image, you have to release a new artifact as well, right? So each time you come up with new image, you come up with new artifact and sign both. and but I cannot find any more examples of what you described, Dirk, like any descriptors or so.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing where we could say is like, I don't know, confidential computing runtime environment required or something like that. So we don't want anyone to strip that metadata somehow, because that would be a potential attack vector. So that's one thing where I could think about. It needs to be in the signed or in the trusted set of attributes labels.
But does it mean if, for example, we have encrypted image, should we encrypt as well artifact in that case? That because after all,
No, I think it shouldn't be encrypted, but I think it should be signed so that it's not cannot be tampered with.
yeah. I mean, with signing artifact, that shouldn't be a problem, I think.
Yeah, well, you can sign the artifacts that as well, and then you need to figure out that they both belong together. Or yeah, I mean, yes, I guess that's the workaround, or I mean, that's the extensibility. Yeah.
That sounds actually like a good option. I'm trying to think hard that where would it really become a real problem if you don't sign it and then you run the confidential container on something that's not exactly according to your specification. Isn't, well, the confidential container, does it need to actually contain anyway measures against this kind of behavior?
Yeah, it does. I agree.
The question is where you're going to put this check, because in the end you would have something like a TPM that stores all the runtime measurements and provides the measurements to the upper layer, which is then using, as I described before, the runtime measurements compared against the gold measurements via policy, stating which thing is valid or not. So the question really is here, are we integrating the check into the mechanics that we're building here, that the signed OCI artifact belongs to the very same OCI container? And I agree, for confidential computing, this is really a major point, because in the end, you want to measure your complete stack against some expected values that you expect to be, and to have the right annotation or OCI artifacts is also crucial. I'm just thinking of where we are going to put this check in. And I agree, this needs to be signed, not to be encrypted. I don't think that's going to have any confidential data telling the container where it's run. One attack vector would be that you are telling the container that you are, if you're saying, okay, I need a confidential environment, and you tamper with the artifact and say, okay, and you're fooling the container that it's running on a confidential environment, but it's not to expose any encrypted data. I need to think about that, how, if we can. Yeah, but it's a good point.
I make a note out of that, so you can verify if everything is okay there. But Zvonko, if you have any ideas or thoughts, please also send a mail to them. Yeah. Okay, guys, since we have only 10 minutes left, I mean, we still have 10 minutes left. So if nobody has any topic, I think we can end the meeting earlier. And on the Americas meeting, I will quickly summarize at the beginning what we discuss in here. And that also I will say that this group is more into artifact weight and annotations.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Have a good week and talk to you next Monday. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.